issuing a press release that it shall not engage with this private mission. And it outlined in that press release some of the reasons why. Let me, at the very beginning, say that we've had a really good relationship with the U.S. government that has grown over the past several years. It's a frank relationship, and we don't shy away from contentious issues. We have consistently, as a party, held the view and have actively promoted nationally the coming together of our people. You've seen evidence of this, that we're the only political party in this country that has received crossover votes in large numbers from people of different races. We're only multi-ethnic party. You see this now reflected in the composition of the cabinet, the legislature or legislators. You see it at the local government levels, at the regional level. No other political party in this country has the level of ethnic diversity as the People's Progressive Party. We don't need to dream this up. It's not by conjecture. It's a fact that's known to everyone, and it is easily verifiable. It's also verifiable the results of the last local government elections, in which we won in some traditional APNU strongholds, Madhya, Bartika, and we made significant gains in others. Georgetown, Linden, we got 2,000 votes more, Kwakwani, Mukka, almost every other area that we've contested in. In New Amsterdam, significant gains. And we've done so largely because we've been fair-minded in our policy making and because of the overarching philosophy of this party from the time of its formation. It's also a fact, so these things could be proven. We have always argued that our track record is there in every single area to be seen by the public, and we are prepared to debate anyone on the track record, our own track record, in terms of bringing people together and ensuring that all Guyanese share the progress that our country is making. We're clear about that. We're prepared to defend our record. Another fact, though, is that we've consistently been subjected to allegations of racism by APNU. They've done this without any facts, without evidence to prove the racism, but as a political strategy or a tactic to keep people ethnically divided and therefore benefit politically. That's a fact. They do not have a campaign outside of racism. They can't campaign on their track record, which has been a dismal one for the 30-odd years they've been in government. All of that period, if you look at it, the entire period, at the end of the period, we are worse off than when we started. Worse off as a country. When they took over in 1964, by the time they left in 1992, we were worse off. As though the 28 years did not matter. We made no progress. We decumulated wealth. We lost welfare. People fled this country in large numbers. There was no freedom in this country. And The same thing happened in the 5 years. We started to see the decline again when they took over from 2015 to 2020. The policy making punished poor people, more taxation, loss of jobs, large-scale loss of jobs, etc., an era of hopelessness. So their only resort is to racism. So that's not new, the allegations of racism, something we've had to live with. We have made it clear in our manifesto that we want inclusivity. We're prepared to work towards greater inclusivity as a philosophy of the party. When we discuss this with the US government, when they mention inclusivity, they're simply mentioning what we already have in our manifesto when we campaign at the election time. So it's nothing new. The United States has never asked for power sharing, as some people would like us to believe here. They've called for inclusivity, which is something that we're in favor of. Now, we've consistently had to educate people who have been misled locally, but of recent, and I spoke of this before, that now APNU's allegations of discrimination do not have the type of resonance in Guyana as it had in the past, because people have witnessed them in the 5 years in government, and they see the efforts of the new government to promote the livelihoods and welfare of all of our people. So they go abroad now. That's the only place they find some resonance in the old propaganda of ethnic discrimination. So they go to conferences abroad, they write letters to the State Department, etc. And we've been able to debunk every one of those with facts. Now, President Ali himself has done so. We have had engagements with the Congressional Black Caucus. We said we are open to any questions about ethnic or racial discrimination. We can factually prove that it's propaganda. President Ali has a great respect for members of the Black Caucus, the U.S. Congressional Black Caucus. We believe they are allies on many issues, including global issues and issues of resonance for the Caribbean. But one thing we will not do is to subject ourselves to people who, in their private capacities, descend upon our country to prove what they've already issued as definitive position in earlier press releases. So we have no obligation to do that, but we remain an open country to any questions. We can prove our track record of bringing people together and progress in this country. And I have made this statement, and I stand by it as General Secretary of this party and Vice President of this country, that Afro-Guyanese have made the most progress in their lives under PPP governments. And we can prove this factually, as of all of Guyana, every other ethnic group too, but including Afro-Guyanese. So I just want to say that we're open to balanced discussions, objective discussions on this issue. But when an organization will, in a press release of the 26th of October 2023, say that this is one of the statements, say, The allegations of racial discrimination and human rights violations have cast a dark shadow over the nation, threatening the very fabric of its society. You can't be speaking about Guyana, because there's no dark shadow over our nation. There was a dark shadow when APNU tried to steal the elections for the 5 months. There was a really dark shadow over the nation at that time, because our entire democratic foundation was under threat, and our way of life and our freedom and future was under threat. That was the period in which we had a dark shadow over the nation, and the threat came from the same APNU, not from the PPP. But now we are the fastest growing economy in the world. We have generated over 50,000 jobs in the last 3 years alone. More people are coming here. Guyanese are returning home. We've seen a large number who left this country for a number of years now coming back, trying to seek citizenship here. We have a number of people who want to live in Guyana or try to immigrate to our country. We've seen growing access to health care and almost every other area of development in our country. This is not a dark shadow hanging over our country. And it's not threatening the very fabric of our society. I don't see us. In fact, in the United States of America, they probably have more disruptions of an ethnic nature than we have in this society. I don't see any of that. But to put that in your press release before you come to Guyana, it's judgmental. It's judgmental. And if you're impartial, as you claim to be, and want to find out the truth about the country. Secondly, cannot say that we know of this extremist criminal Burke who lives in the United States of America, who's been hiding now from justice here. He's extremist because he's trying to divide our people along ethnic lines. We know he's a criminal, he extorted people, he's wanted for extorting businessmen here. Now he held a conference call, he has an organization. He's a one-man show, has a single person organization called CGID in the United States. They organized a conference in Washington. The Embassy of Guyana tried to attend the conference. They were selling tickets to the conference. They asked to send a number, including the ambassador will go to the conference, so that any issue that the delegates to the conference raise, they could have the government respond there, the opposition would be there. They refused to allow participation from the government on a conference on Guyana held in Washington, organized by Burke. Now, Burke has not been shy about saying he's organizing this. He's spoke about this several times. They had media reports, he was advertising it, and he made all kinds of claims about Congress people will attend his and speak at his conference, etc., which didn't happen. Now, this group is claiming that they don't know about Burke or his organization in a press conference here. But in the very press release, they said on 26th of October, to their dismay, we were made aware of conversations emanating from the recently concluded Washington Conference on Guyana, where allegations were made by Guyanese opposition members of parliament. So you are taken as the primary source of these allegations that have cast a dark shadow on the nation, coming from a conference held only for opposition members by a criminal called Burke. You're saying you don't know who this person or the organization, but they arranged the conference. What sort of research are you doing? So this sounds not plausible to me. It sounds not plausible. Because the same extreme rhetoric of Rickford Burke, racist rhetoric of Rickford Burke and others, have found their way into the statement. Burke has been talking about this mission even before this first press release. In fact, he issued a release before the first press release from this mission, saying he's made aware that that soon this group will be coming to Guyana. So that's so much for knowledge of Burke and the extremist rhetoric. Now, you're independent, but we know the Critchlow Labour College, TUC. That's where you hold your press conference. They are almost vilely hostile to the government of Guyana, people like Lincoln Lewis and the others. Roysdale Ford and the others have been traveling with this group. He has been traveling with the group. He was in the meeting in New Amsterdam with the group. And then it was announced, the chairs, from what I was told by people, was announced for a town hall meeting and set up out downstairs. But it was later moved up into the chamber so that you could have limited number of participants. So much for the objectivity of the mission. I'm not going to deal with the speculation that this group is coming to help Roysdale Ford because he has weak number is in the contest for leadership of the PNC, that he's not getting many delegates from Berbice or from Linden. And so this is to help him to secure more delegates. If he could bring a fact-finding mission into these communities, then he's doing a greater job than Norton. That's been speculation in the public domain. I'm just addressing the issue that they have publicly said they came here to do. Now, that's so much for objectivity. So how objective could you be when the people who are chaperoning you are the same people who are making these wild allegations? Then the third thing, I dealt with Burke, I dealt with the objectivity. The third issue is, have the members of this group asked the opposition, or the same people, Roysdale Ford and everyone else, is there a constitutional mechanism to address racism in Guyana? And have you explored this constitutional mechanism? If they had asked that, they will find out that we have in Guyana a bipartisan constitutional body, unlike that of the United States or anything in any state or federal legislature or any at the federal level, to address racism in Guyana. In the new constitution, we passed the Ethnic Relations Commission. The Ethnic Relations Commission in Guyana can only be put together with bipartisan support. The Ethnic Relations of Guyana can conduct hearings and direct the executive to remedy the situation. They even have the powers to prohibit a political party from contesting elections if that party were to use race as a mobilizing factor. That's a very powerful. Imagine the power to prohibit a party from contesting elections. And that power is vested in the ERC, a bipartisan body. So the first question should have been, how many cases have been filed before the ERC for ethnic discrimination? And the second question is, the answer would have been probably 0 or 1 or 2. Why are you coming to talk to us in the US? Why don't you use that mechanism first? And if you don't get remedy there, then we can look into this matter. But in the US, we ourselves don't have that, what you have in your country. That's the first question that should have been asked, and I hope they still ask that question, because that's the mechanism set up. Secondly, people have recourse to the court. We are a free country, we have separation of power. If you're being discriminated against, it's against our law and constitution for reasons of sexual orientation and all of that stuff. And race and religion, our constitution prohibits all of this. You can easily file a case in the court. So you can't claim that the court is made up of PPP members alone. The court the courts of Guyana are independent, and the 2 top posts in the judiciary are held by Afro-Guyanese women. So why don't you try the courts to seek remedy against discrimination? So when you can't, this will prove how fake these claims are, because they can't stand up. You can have a Nigerian say, oh, they're discriminating against villages and roads, etc., but would never say that in Buxton now we're doing about $1 billion worth of roads. They can be jaundiced and share selective information. But if there was discrimination, any foreign body that comes to Guyana must not undermine the democratic nature of the society and the institutions of a society. They should ask whether those are followed first, and then if people can get remedy there, then they can say, okay, then we will raise this as an issue. But to think that this is a mission in the private capacity, and to think that the United States of America can tell us what to do in this case, or to undermine our democratic institutions, is something that we find very unusual and strange. For people who claim that they are here to support the country and rule of law and democracy. So we are going to continue to engage everyone. We're proud of our track record of bringing people together. We continue to work at this, and we remain open to discussion with anyone, but we are not going to be dictated to. We're not going to be dictated to, especially by people who claim objectivity, but their actions don't support those statements of objectivity. I would urge people who have not been following this issue closely to look at the statements that have come out, not just from this group, but from Rickford Burke, and to see how closely coordinated, and in fact, how often Rickford Burke will issue a statement even before the official statement comes out from this group. How closely coordinated? Week after week, we come here to talk about our economic policies. I thought that somehow people would have a clear understanding of the differences between the People's Progressive Party and our economic policies and those of APNU. Just in the past 2 weeks, I've had to debunk this idea that APNU has a development strategy. Last week I spoke about that when Stabroek News said they unveiled their development strategy. And it was a 4-page document, 4 pages, and had 5 points, all of a generic nature, which doesn't qualify itself to be called a development strategy. In fact, the preamble to our development strategy is 10 times longer than the entire development strategy, the National Development Strategy. We have demonstrated that in every single area, they were lost at sea. And that the cumulative effect of this lack of vision, the lack of policies and programs to support their public statements that were often of an economic nature but contradictory, that they have all resulted cumulatively in us losing output at the national level and economic welfare. I don't need to demonstrate that again based on their taxation policy and the loss of jobs and the confusion that reigns in their camp. Every time they went to Washington at the same conference and said they have an economic strategy, but it's a secret. They're waiting for 2025 to unveil it. They claim they had one here. They unveiled 5 points. Nothing. They have absolutely zero. So it seems as though we're almost, and they take objection that we point this out. I see Norton getting a little hot under the collar and calling me names, which is the usual stuff because I pointed this out. So they have no plan, economic plan for this country. But we have a running battle against those who seek to distort what the facts are and the nature of our party. And as General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, particularly, these things particularly not bother me, but I think dictate that I respond. So I saw the Stabroek News editorial becoming petty bourgeois. And it was followed up by a Peeping Tom article. It seems to be heavy coordination now between Stabroek News. It's following a pattern almost. Stabroek said the editorial, then there's a Peeping Tom. Maybe it's the same person writing the editorial and the Peeping Tom in Kaichor News. But they're all geared towards saying, oh, the PPP is not doing well, and giving the PNC a free pass. So the purpose of this article was to say that it went back to the Cold War rhetoric. Marxism, Leninism, period. Someone dated in that era who believed that you have to put isms to anything that's good for the country. And they say we're pragmatic. So they want to us to go back maybe to debate over the isms. You know, socialism versus capitalism, the nature of the working class, the petty bourgeois, and all of that. It's a rhetoric that's dated. Secondly, so I'm not going to go through everything. It just says one thing, very disparagingly says that the PPP has forgotten its working class outlook and is promoting policies for the rise of a petit bourgeois. And they define petit bourgeois as basically electricians, contractors, lower middle class. So we have been a working class party, and we have no apology for working to make people wealthier and getting out of poverty and becoming petit bourgeois and bourgeois and everything else. So why are we doing this? Because that's from the beginning. We never change our philosophy in the People's Progressive Party. If you look at the 1950s, when those were the days of the isms, the first industrial estate for private sector development was built under the Chadijagan government. And that was industrial estate for investors, bourgeois, to invest there so they could create more jobs at Rumveld. It started off with that, even in the heyday of the isms. We've always wanted people to come out of poverty and to start owning things. So the people that they define as petit bourgeois are people who own a house now and maybe 2 reconditioned vehicles and stuff. Very disparaging editorial about people who start owning things. So they own a little home and they own a 2 reconditioned vehicle and they take a trip abroad with their family once in a while. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? So we must, to prove a point that we're a working class party, keep people all their lives in poverty. Well, let me say, we want every Guyanese to own a home. And we have no apology to whether Stabrook News or the others want to call that petit bourgeois or whatever else in this world, whatever isms they want. We want every Guyanese to own a home. That started from the first PPP government, and we have had the most success, not just in Guyana, but the entire region, in transferring land from the state to private individuals in the form of house lots, subsidized house lots, and the largest stock of new homes built anywhere in this region was built under PPP tenure in office. So much so that tens of thousands of people have moved out from living in rental properties now and own a home. You can call whatever you want, petit bourgeois or anything else, Stabrook News. We are proud of that. We are proud of that. To take people out from living in a place with 3-4 families in a single building to owning their own home. And we will continue with this so-called petit bourgeois policy until all Guyanese can own their own home. We like people to own things. We want them to own nicer homes too, big homes, etc., and once they work for it. Secondly, we're happy that people are owning reconditioned vehicles, because there was a time when, I know when going to school, one vehicle used to pass like every 15 minutes on the road. So we used to play by the roadside, and then we'd hear a song coming. And then everybody would just wait to try to see if you get the vehicle to stop to go to school. That is how it used to be. When the government imported ladder, only the ladder vehicle, only for government ministers and government officials. You had to get a party card to buy a vehicle on the APNU, like how you had to get party cards to go to the knowledge sharing institutes that were selling food, restricted items. The people don't know that history. That is how it used to be under APNU. When I first heard knowledge sharing institutes, I thought these were educational institutes. But they used to sell like a pint of oil, and Dennis is smiling because he knows he probably went there for a pint of black-eyed peas or something like that. You had to go there and join a line, and often people with a party card got first preference. That used to be the era. We're proud today that a large number of vehicles are coming into the country, and people are owning things. They're owning even a reconditioned vehicle. And we'll continue to work so people will do that. We'll continue to work to create more petit bourgeois in this country, because that's why we're promoting small business development. We're saying to young people who are coming out of school, start your own business, bid for Exxon Mobil contracts there, do something with yourselves. Just don't come to work for government. Just don't come and work. Own something, employ others. But they're not going to be petit bourgeois, because even if they own a cake shop and they employ one other person, that means they become bourgeois under the old definition, because they're employing and profiting from wage labor under the old Marxist definition. But we are proud that we are promoting small business in this petit bourgeois thing. So they wanted us to keep, we're proud that there is a growing middle class now in this country. We had no middle class in this country. I told you about the Ramperkar study that found, I think it 88% just before we got into office. It was done in 1990 through CMAP. It found that 88% of our people at that time was living below the poverty line. There was no middle class in this country. Today we have a lower middle class, we have an upper middle class, we have a smaller group of wealthy people, and we're hoping to get everyone, all of our working people to grow and to become petit bourgeois and mid owners of things. So regardless of what you call it, that's not my definition of it. So they said, apart from being critical of me and move the party along that line, in turn the party reward their supporters with lucrative contracts. This is the bourgeois, the big middle class now they're talking about, the bourgeois class, that we are awarding them with lucrative contracts as well as scholarships. We have 21,000 people on goal studying in scholarships. I don't think they are the bourgeois who are studying there. These are the bourgeois class we're rewarding with scholarships. If you look at APNU, they had less than 1,000 scholarships in 5 years. Look at who got the scholarships. It's Simona Brooms and their children and a lot of politically connected people. The 21,000 people studying on gold scholarship. I think 460 something just finished their masters. Though I don't see that as petit bourgeois, or this is the bourgeois now. We're rewarding them with scholarships. It's utter nonsense. The PPP is the building of, this one takes it all. The building of highways over public transportation systems such as light rail or even public buses also reflects the party's prioritization of the private vehicle owner. So we are prioritizing private vehicle owners by building highways now because we are petit bourgeois. That we're not building light rails and we're not building public buses. Now, APNU destroyed the railway that we had. They destroyed the railway. They destroyed the public transportation system. But because we are building roads now, we have a preference for private vehicle owners in this country because we're petit bourgeois. Working class party would go and build a rail. You must now build roads for these private vehicle owners. It's so nonsensical to think that an editorial will speak about this nonsense. And to take on millions of dollars of debt, they're none better than shacks in nowhere with zero resale value. This is the government housing program they're talking about, that it is these poor people are taking on millions of dollars of debt with no resale value for their home. We have now a huge list of these poor people who are waiting anxiously. In fact, we can't supply the demand for the core homes and also for the young professional homes. But this is how disparaging they see it. Oh, these people are taking on debt. These homes have no resale value. One of those homes could be sold for twice as much or maybe 3 times as much the day you get hold of it, the key in your hand, if you put it on the private market. So it's another lie, a total lie. Oh, we were convenient when we said we had removed the VAT on, we took off corporate taxes on private schools and hospitals. We took off corporate tax on healthcare and education, largely because we wanted more investments in these sectors, but that's a petty bourgeois policy of the government. The parking meter one, we blame for that too. That the parking meter, because this petty bourgeois group didn't want to pay for parking meters. And therefore, the PPP served as self-interest when they opposed the parking meter. Not that this was a corrupt transaction. This is the stupidest editorial I've seen in a long, long time. I've never seen anything nonsensical like this. We get blamed for everything under the sun. And because I can go on. It's not the end of it. It's like a long list of nonsense. And of course, that the ruling party has strayed far from its roots, because we want people to own things and get wealthier and get a house and a car and get a job and you can go on a vacation once in a while. Because we are doing this, we've strayed from our roots. We haven't strayed from our roots. We have remained consistent with our roots. We don't want to keep people poor all their lives. That's for APNU. And for people, this class in the Starbuck News, who believe that they can lecture to everyone else about policies. A petty bourgeois. And that's why Ramatar wants us to go back to our roots. That's what they said. So Ramatar is now the new champion of the pet, that we've strayed from our working class roots. It's utter nonsense. Utter nonsense, and I saw it being picked up elsewhere. We're clear about what we want to achieve, and you see us working every part of the country, from the interior to communities, making sure people are getting better health care, roads, etc. It's a huge task, but everywhere you've seen manifestation of this, or people are growing more. And we're suppressing wages and salaries in the public sector. It's $37 billion more before the wage increase for this year that people have gotten from 2020 to now. $37 billion more in the pockets of our public servants. That is how much has grown. Wages and salaries have grown. We have seen widely reported the presentations before the ICJ, and I hope that people will follow closely what's going on at the ICJ. As you know, we had national consensus to move forward based on the advice of our lawyers to seek provisional measures in relation to the proposed referendum that Venezuela plans to execute in early December. And we did not oppose the referendum. We, as was explained by our lawyers, and Venezuela, through their presentation, sought to distort. We were opposed to questions posed at that referendum, particularly questions 3 and 5. One that seeks, question 3, seeks to repudiate the jurisdiction of the ICJ, and 5 could lead to an annexation of our territory. So I've seen the presentation at the ICJ and the attempt to mischaracterize our entire application, which is as though we're interfering in a sovereign activity. I've seen Vice President Delcy Rodriguez make a number of statements in our usual fashion that are misleading, very, very misleading. And one statement that she made that I need today to speak on, because our lawyers have spoken extensively on the other issues. It was reported in the Starbuck News, so I'm going to use the Starbuck News transcript, but I can use the other one. It says, in a statement that will raise concerns, Rodriguez alleged that Guyana was targeting the Venezuelan population living here in violation of international human rights norms and promoting xenophobia. Around 30,000 to 40,000 Venezuelans are thought to be living here after fleeing harsh circumstances in their country. So you have seen me at this press conference and elsewhere speak out against xenophobia. This is a total misrepresentation by Vice President Delcy Rodriguez before the ICJ. She's trying to score political points there by saying that we are violating international human rights norms and promoting xenophobia against Venezuelans here. So she is hoping to get the sympathy of the court by citing this, that this is happening now in Guyana. We have condemned this from the government. Several times I have even gotten into trouble with the opposition for condemning xenophobia and maltreatment of Venezuelans living here. That's the official policy of the government of Guyana and the position of our party. It wasn't done for political reasons. It's largely because we knew that they would misrepresent this issue. And we've seen how misrepresentation has caused a whole range of issues in the past. It started, I'm not saying it's a bad example, but Hitler with Germans who were living in Czechoslovakia at that time, using them as a pretext maltreatment of people, the Germans who were living in Czechoslovakia, as a pretext for invasion. We've seen it happen with Russia. We've seen it with Turkey, many countries using this as a pretext. Venezuela should not be misrepresenting this issue, particularly before the court. It's a lie. We have condemned xenophobia, and we have ensured that people continue to be treated, all Venezuelans, including when the majority are our own people. You've heard us speak about this before, that they're treated with dignity and with respect here. We made it clear also from the very beginning, you break our laws, you face consequences. It's not a free pass. We have made that distinction, and it's clear about that. So I want to say that her statement before the ICJ is false. This is not happening in Guyana. This is not happening. This is misleading the ICJ on this issue. Maybe I'd end there. I just have a number of other things, but when I look at them, it's all right. Yeah, Dennis.
Mr. Jagdeo, Dennis Gibraltar Airwaves. Sir, is there any possibility that the government of Guyana may submit any additional memorandum to the court to deal with the whole question of, or the allegation that Venezuelans are being mistreated here? And secondly, are you or is your party prepared to now remove references of Marxism-Leninism from your party's constitution?
The latter question, that's a question for Congress. The General Secretary of a party cannot alter the constitution of a party on his own. It's a question for Congress.
You advocate it?
I have my positions, and I'm not going to, in the public domain, explore this. I'll explore it at the appropriate levels in the party. We've consistently been a working class party. We're now wedded to isms. We want to make sure that all of our people make progress in this country. We want to work for poor people to get into the middle class and then wealthy. So if any ism whatsoever is inconsistent with that, it cannot continue to be the prevailing philosophy of our party. Cannot. The first question.
Yes, I was asking if is the government prepared to submit any additional memorandum to the court between now and this decision?
I hope our lawyers point this out, because it's a crucial, as Albert Cruz pointed out, it's a cause for concern. And I hope our lawyers show how many times we have spoken. I got personally in trouble with APNU because of that position. When I spoke and I said there shall be no xenophobia in this country, and someone took what I said and made a video of it, a Venezuelan national, and then they accused me, APNU accused me of all sorts of things. But we have consistently, every week you've come here and we've spoken out against xenophobia and fear and decent treatment of Venezuelans here, and all the institutions of state are according people that treatment in keeping with our obligations on the international law and standards of decency, the norms of decency. We have consistently held that view. I have even gone so far as to argue that as a nation that sent people abroad, including into Venezuela, when times were difficult here, they became economic migrants, that we have beyond international law, we have a moral obligation to treat people fairly when they come here to look for a living, economic migrants. We've been on the record. So for her to go and tell the court this, that we're practicing and promoting xenophobia here, is patently false. It's false. And so our lawyers should address that.
Can I press you on the earlier question, sir, with respect to ideology? To what extent do you see Marxism as still a viable tool in the analysis of society today?
Marxism, like you have maybe thousands of economic theories. Theories, we're promoting something that is very simple. The keeping our country intact, that is, our frame of reference has always been a simple one in the PPP, keeping our country intact. And our track record on the border is a good one. 2, making sure that we utilize our resources sustainably for the development of all of our people. Thirdly, ensuring that we manage the economy well so that we can tackle issues like job creation and the growth of welfare in Guyana, economic welfare of Guyana, keeping our people safe. If you get caught up in the ideology, which one of the global ideology best you can situate this framework in, it's a sterile debate as far as I'm concerned. Sterile at this time. I don't think it's an era for that. It's how do we get all of our children in school, get a better quality education for our children in school, wherever they live, make sure that more of our people get a university education. That's why scholarship programs, getting better paying jobs so people, getting more of the oil resources out and transform into other assets so that can long-term benefit our people, adapting to climate change. Those are the issues that preoccupy us all the time. There's a group of people in society, they sit in an armchair, they have nothing else to do. They write papers. And they have the luxury of every time saying, oh, the government should be pursuing this ism or that ism. They never had to negotiate a loan or do a feasibility study or get something done. I'm now part of that armchair class of people. We can do that theoretical debate as a matter of academic interest. Maybe someday we can host a conference and talk about that. And that's where you'd see us talk about it theoretically. I've dealt with that in my younger days, a lot of those theoretical debates. Now we have the business of government to ensure that we deliver on our promises to people and we change this country. That's how we are approaching it as a party. People may call that pragmatism, but it's addressing what you hear from the ground. When I go on the ground, people say good governance is listening to your people. When governments listen to their people, that's good governance. When I go to Blackbush Polder, or I go to Port Morant, or I go to Moruca, or Linden, I don't hear which ideology you're pursuing. People say, when are you fixing our roads? We want jobs here. What about the health care there? That's what they want. You're going to think I'm going to tell them, oh, we're planning the purity, we're making sure we're pure, we maintain the purity of our ideology based on Stabrook News. They would chase me out of the area. They'd say, this man's wasting time. He didn't tell us when we're getting the house lot. So that sort of thing. And that's supposed to be good governance, responding to the questions you hear from the people, responding to people. When you're going to have cheaper power. That's how we are approaching it, Dennis. Yes, please.
This thing is on? Dr. Jagdeo, Guyanese critic for
okay.
Daybreak News.
Today, he got the microphone ahead of you. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm hoping that the Venezuelan issue takes precedence today because of the fact, and hoping that the publisher, the madness of Kaichur News publisher, doesn't take precedence, since oil will become irrelevant if Venezuela gets its way. So that would be no more also. A cable, because of the uneasiness in our society, it's coming from a lot of misinformation or information that suggests you yourself might be responsible for the uneasiness with Guyana and Venezuela. And this comes from a Peeping Tom article today that spoke to a U.S. cable from the U.S. Embassy. It states, U.S. Embassy diplomatic cable date 16th June 2006 reported that then Bharrat Jagdeo, President Bharrat Jagdeo, told the embassy officials that he was told by Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez.
I read the article, because anything to do with borders, wherever they come from, I read the article. So you don't need to read the whole Peeping Tom article. So I saw that article, and I don't want to gloat. I don't want to gloat, because for me, even if it means not speaking much about the issue, once it serves our national interests, I don't mind being criticized. But you've seen the extreme criticisms that I have received. And I don't know if you saw that article. The article basically pointed out that that this offer of the sea lane to the Atlantic, and even a sliver of coastal territory, was made in 1990 under Desmond Hoyt, formally. And that it was part of the Venezuela's memorandum to the ICJ in March of 2018. When you remember they filed in 2018, Venezuela included that. I checked it, it's on page 88 of their memorandum. So you recall all these extremists, the extremists being saying, blaming me for this. You wanna continue this on the same matter?
Yes, Dr. Jagdeo.
Okay, go on.
So it states and suggests that you said, Hugo Chavez, that the Venezuelan claim to Guyana territory was spurious and that the dispute was an imperialist issue. Do you maintain that stance? I think I'm asking for clarity if that document exists. It's a Peeping Tom article. A lot of times they give misinformation that suggests that this is a U.S. cable. I don't know if it's a U.S. cable. Knowing U.S. interference around the world, can you say if this is so, and is that still your stance?
So you're not dealing with the second issue, all right. So there are two issues mentioned in that article. You asked about the first issue. So I think the Peeping Tom recognized that this issue would be exposed now. So all that they have been making big noise about is not me. It's APNU who actually did that. So they had to find something to say that Jagdeo is to be blamed. So they said that in a cable I mentioned to the US that came out in WikiLeaks, that in a cable I said that Hugo Chavez came to Guyana and he mentioned that this border issue was an imperialist invention. So the article left it hanging there. So the fact is this accurate? The question is this accurate? Did I say that to the US government? And the answer is yes, I did say that. And one, I also spoke about, if you look at the cable, about not prioritizing the road link between Venezuela and Guyana that Hugo Chavez was pushing, because I said it would be a Trojan horse. And our biggest priority would have been other roads, the road to Brazil, etc. So what I said to the US, was that a secret at that time? So I checked it because I knew this issue would come up. This is what Starbuck News of the 2004 reported. As a young military officer, Hugo Chavez pored over plans to determine the best routes for an invasion of Guyana. Now as president, he says he still studies maps, but now it is to determine what would be the best route for the proposed road link between Guyana and Venezuela. Speaking to parliamentarians and civic leaders at Le Méridien Pegasus Hotel and at a joint press conference he hosted with President Bharrat Jagdeo at State House on Thursday evening during his one-day state visit, Chavez laid much of the blame for the historic tensions between Caracas and Georgetown on the United States. Chavez said the US fomented strife between Guyana and Venezuela so as to divide them and push them into an armed conflict. He said it was a very similar strategy to that of arming ousted Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, which sparked a 10-year war between Iran and Iraq. That was the imperialist plan, which created great business because since then Venezuela has been in debt because of its heavy expenditure on military equipment, much of which was obsolete and obtained from North America. He went on to recall that the possibility in the 60s of Guyana becoming another Cuba was used to whip up antagonism in the Venezuelan military. So this is what he was saying, that at that time, the US was worried about Guyana becoming a second Cuba, and therefore Venezuela was urged to reopen the border question in 1962. That should Guyana become a second Cuba, because 1959 Fidel Castro came into office, that Venezuela would have invaded and reversed the process. So it was an imperialist invention. This is not a secret what I said to the US. In fact, it was in the public domain. He said this publicly. And this is what we've been saying, that Venezuela is retreating. Maduro is retreating from what Chavez said, that it was an imperialist intervention, and that if he is a disciple of Chavez, Hugo Chavez, then he should really be following what Chavez claimed, which was an imperialist intervention. And secondly, if they claim they're disciples of Simon Bolivar was fighting imperialist powers, not small countries, not small independent countries. So anyhow, let me don't get divert into that. So the question is, was that said to the US? And the answer is yes. Was it a secret position? The answer is no. It was reported since then in the media that Chavez actually said this. So that's the first part of the article. The second part of that I was addressing, that's the same peeping Tom, is that and I explained to you that what bench cop, all the madcaps in this country, Rickford Burke, Sherrod Duncan, some members of the PNC, Lincoln Lewis wrote several letters to the Stabroek News claiming I must be investigated, I must be tried for treason, they must debate my statement in Parliament about that I offered Venezuela this channel into the Atlantic. Are they going to now say it was treasonous because this offer was made in 1990, long before the PPP got into office, and it's now documented on page 88 of the Venezuelan memorandum to the ICJ that was submitted in March 2018. What are they going to do now? Now, that doesn't preclude our national position. It never, because that was a discussion, and that's what I said when I was asked at the press conference. I said I'm aware that there was a position in the government, but that doesn't weaken our case. That doesn't weaken our case, and we all support the 1899 award as the final settlement to the border matter, 1899 award. But now I want to see, do they owe me an apology? These madcaps will never apologize. For months now, they've been running this campaign against me. The madcaps and people like Amanza Walton and all of these in Parliament. When I was in Parliament the day, they were heckling about Channel. Well, now that they have it in black and white, what are they going to do now? With the APNU people, they put their foot in their mouth every single time because they try to make political issues on matters of national significance, which I've stayed away from. Why do you think I stay quiet on a lot of these issues? Why do you think? Not that I can't respond to these madcaps, but this is the position. I don't toy with issues of borders and boundaries, etc. But now that it has come out, the whole world would know. It's in a Peeping Tom article. It's come out now, so that's why I'm speaking today about it. But it has now come out in the public domain, and I hope that you call them and ask them about this. This is a disgusting thing they've been going on. Are they going to try the people now for treason? That they have been pushing to try them for treason, for making that proposal. Would they try that, the persons who make that for treason? Would they debate it in Parliament now? This is the vilification. And you wonder why? Than to give him this prominence. Every week I see something from him. I must face the courts for doing this. I must face parliamentary for making that offer. I hope Stabroek News call him and ask him what he thinks about it now. But that's like hoping against all
questions, Dr. Jagdeo.
Yes, go ahead.
At the previous press conference, you expressed confidence in the opposition's sincerity. While many of their associates are trying to create mischief, do you still express that confidence?
I believe that APNU, the PNC supports our border matters sincerely in national positions. They're not stronger on the border than us. We're all united on the border. They like to portray themselves as stronger, but we are together on it. So I believe they do so in all sincerity. but they don't shut down the madcaps who are associated with them, including some of their MPs. I don't think that's the official position of the PNC. And their hatred for me personally is so much, they're prepared to undermine a national issue just to score political points. That is what they've been doing, personal vilification, falsely claiming that I made this offer. For months now, it's been going on, for years practically. But they've activated it more and more in months. And this is, so I believe that APNU supports us. We are, let me state this for clarity. The borders were settled in 1899. That's a national position that we all share. 1899, they were settled. And that's the position we share.
Dr.
And
Jagdeo.
nothing that I've said here is just because the matters come out now in a Peeping Tom article.
Jagdeo, there's lots of unease in our society as since Venezuela has shown aggression, and all we have had is the courts, the international courts, and diplomacy at its highest level we're working on. Is your administration looking at our neighbors for military options? Venezuela continues. To our neighbors, Trinidad, Brazil.
If we're doing that, you're not going to hear it from me nor at the press conference.
Dr. Jagdeo, Derwin Wills, NCN. Two things. Firstly, the activist Rickford Burke wanted for sedition, inciting public terror, extortion. Earlier this year, there was a position that he could be extradited. But I want to know, has there been any progress in that regard in relation to extradition?
You should ask Anil Nandalal. Nandalal deals with this issue, extradition and all of that. I think he is scared of coming back here. There's Burke and a few others who are sniping from the U.S. But I don't know what progress there is. Contrary to his belief, you know, we think about him all the time. It's only at the press conferences I pay attention to him. I see he took umbrage when I said he came out the basement now. So, Burke, but this is a hardcore criminal masquerading over there. You'd see by tonight he would start putting out like, he'd go like in a strill kind of thing. He'd be running crazy by tonight. Yeah. But I hope that the people, the fact-finding mission, as I said before they came, they do some fact-finding on him. And then they would realize who he really is. Since they're here in Ghana, they should fact-find him with a police force. Ask the police force to give them the facts about him.
The second thing, sir, Venezuela has been using social media, TikTok, to push out its narrative. On the other side, we've seen, for example, some of our military folks in uniform who've been using TikTok quite differently and going viral for things like dance trends, etc., while they're in uniform. Is there something that we would want to consider regarding the use of social media by military persons when they're in uniform, as well as where they're located, because this could possibly be a security risk?
Yeah, I think there's a code of conduct and standards for the discipline services that are more rigid than for the rest of society. And anything that is done by people, particularly when in uniform, that could bring disrepute to their organization or national security must be addressed by the heads of these agencies.
Good afternoon, sir. Davina Bagat with Kaiser News. A few questions from me. Firstly, it's been 19 months since Exxon updated the Stabroek Block resources. Can you say what is government's position on this?
What did Vikram Bharrat tell you?
He didn't respond to this.
Did you ask him that question?
It wasn't in the
No, you
openness
didn't
yet.
ask him the question. The next time Vikram Bharrat hosts a press conference, ask him that one.
Sir, I wanted to know.
I told you already, I'm not dealing with routine matters. I want to deal with the policy. Get on to ask me the policy questions. Compliance with agreements and stuff like that, that's a routine matter for the ministry.
On that note then, can you say what is in place to protect Guyana financially from a spill that occurs outside of the Stabroek Block during exploration?
You asked that question.
Which was not addressed by the minister, by the way.
Yes, you asked that question, and I addressed that issue many, many times before when it was asked about whether a study was done to look at the overall impact on other countries, etc. I addressed that matter. I'm not senile, I know about it. So I'm not responding again there. Glenn Lal would have a... Like all, Vikram exhausted all the Kaichor News questions.
Afternoon, Sharvin Kaichor. Can we have an update on the suitcase? Were you able to locate him? And
Yes, it was filed. It was filed, and I think it should be heard very soon in court. You can ask the court date. Ask the court. I'm hoping for early date.
was he served with the papers?
Yes, he was served.
Okay, okay.
Dr. Jagdeo, good afternoon. Roland Nelson around the regions. Recently, you've been talking a lot about poor people or ordinary Guyanese owning house lots and moving from one stage of life to another. And you would have also spoken about the ongoing issue where a number of ordinary Guyanese would have bought house lots from NISIL. Can you say what is the status of those ordinary Guyanese?
House lots from NISIL?
When NISIL in 2000, there was the issue, 2020, there was the issue where a number of persons received house lots from NISIL. Among some of those were politicians.
Okay. Land you mean, right?
Sorry,
right,
land.
Yes,
land.
yes,
Yeah.
land, because not necessarily house lots.
Yeah, yes, land.
Land.
But while there were questions about some of those politicians receiving large portions of land, what about the ordinary Guyanese who would have bought land and still kind of get their titles to those lands?
So, last week I explained, was it last week or the week before, I explained that the politicians who got land, I called their names, and many are aligned to APNU. And I pointed out how different it has been that they got land, but ordinary people in Linden could not, particularly in Linden, could not get any land under APNU. If any, petit bourgeoisism, Marcel. And so they got, I pointed that out, to show who APNU was really running the government for. Not ordinary Afro-Guyanese, like they claim, but an elite group of politically connected people who got the land. I also pointed out where the Minister of Finance sold several plots of land, and well, they didn't sell the plots of land, they transferred title without the state collecting any payment for the land, and that is illegal. I told you we filed a few cases and we took back quite a bit of the large tracts of land. But which other category you're talking about?
Among some of those persons who had bought lands were considered to be, according to the government, some ordinary Guyanese would have also.
If you have examples, because I don't know, those are the ones that I know of clearly because they're more high profile. But very few people actually got land from NISIL. And it is like arrangements where like the Wales estate assets were sold out, the buildings. So that didn't come out in the public domain as yet. Who got those two? I think maybe you should explore it. At Enmore, all the houses there were leased again, many to people who are politically connected. In Kanji, they sold out a lot of the assets again to people who are politically connected. At Wales, when the factory was shuttered, they sold out the factory and the metal to scrap metal through a deal that was not transparent. You know, why doesn't somebody do an editorial on this? Why don't they look at this long list of transgressions, flagrant violation of all of the rules? Maybe it's something that you should look at, and then people will see the level of lawlessness with state assets that were done in that period. From 1992 to 2011, that's the last year I left, we issued a booklet, a document, showing every single privatization that was done and how it was done, and the price that we received. A document that was tabled in Parliament from 1992 to 2011, the last year I left the presidency. It went through a process: privatization unit, board, then cabinet. We followed a process. You find out how privatization was done of state assets in those 5 years on the APNO. No process whatsoever. But nobody writes about this. And they got a high mark from the TIGI for transparency. The Transparency Institute of Guyana gave them a high mark for that. But the wanton transfer of state assets to politically connected individuals in that period. Nobody, all these transparency advocates would run off to one pump that was political, was tendered or something like that, and Mahi Paul raises some question, oh, they're getting all in a tizzy over this pump now, because Mahi Paul raised some questions, and ignore the whole past of what happened just a few short years ago. It's almost contemporary history. It's not ancient history, apart from the fact that they didn't submit their statements to the Integrity Commission too. So it's something worth exploring, and maybe we should commission someone to write about it, because the independent media will not write about that. They will not write about that. They'll blame the PPP for it too. The PPP somehow had to be blamed for APNU's transgressions in the 5 years.
Finally, sir, some months ago, the president had done some reshuffling of permanent secretaries, some permanent secretaries. Would we see something similar happening with
I know
regards
he
to
has ideas on the REOs too. REOs, there are some changes, impending changes.
Can you, do you have an idea?
No, that's the president's prerogative. I just answer your question. Even before you asked it, I know that there'll be some impending changes.
Anna Williams, Skytree News. Mr. Jagdeo, Minister Bharrat, through his press engagement, repeated that Minister Bharrat, throughout his Minister Vikram Bharrat, throughout his press engagement, repeated that there will be no different answer from him other than what you have said. If that is so, then why is the minister hosting press conferences?
If you ask the same question of me and the minister, if you ask how much the airfare is from Guyana to New York, and it's $1,000, and I say $1,000, what do you expect the minister to please fabricate news by saying it's $1,001? If the question is the same, he'll give you the same answer. And the questions have been repetitive. It's the same questions you ask. For the last 3 years I've been here, it's the same question. It's just a little one little thing. I get tired of it. I'm sure you all must be getting tired of it, the reporters yourself, asking the same thing over and over again. And so, what do you expect the minister to please you to say, oh, let me be creative and give a different answer? Yes. Is there anything else? Well, thank you very much.